А что сделал Владимир Путин для...
Все сделал, для России он все сделал.
I also wanted to ask, so we all know Slava Ukraini.
Народ, meaning the people. It's like yeah, it's hard to, it's difficult to translate, but it means the people who occupy a nation, the homelanders, you might say in English.
I think Nazi literally translates to nation. It's very straightforward. No,
Yes.
no need to complicate it overly.
Yeah. My bad. Sorry.
And then no worries. I mean, it's such a straight translation. There's no need to complicate it overly. And then Smert Voraham is death to the enemies, which is very useful right now. So in peacetime, often just the Slava Ukraini, Heroim Slava tends to be it. Now in wartime, there's more stanzas, verses, I guess, that tend to be said because there's a little bit more of a need for it than in peacetime, right? So over the last 8 years, the longer version has been far more common than previously, for very obvious reasons.
Can I ask a question about Italian politics?
You have two Italians here who are very willing to help you. Absolutely.
So it seems like it's a bit of a mirror. Let me just ask this. There's a. It seems to me. I mean, we all, those of us vaguely familiar with Italian politics from, the 60s and 70s. There was a bit of a bit of a kerfuffle, right? There were some kerfuffles, you might say, and what I mean is by kerfuffle I mean bloody violence with Italian sort of workers and factory owners, and even including some assassinations and everything. But sort of. Along with that, there were. I mean, we've all seen the Russian. Well, I have. I went to Russia a long time ago in the mid '90s. So I've seen the Italian Fiats run around, and with a lot of label on them, but they're Italian Fiats. And there was a deal, that. So there was a. What I'm trying to say is there was a sort of an industrial. Kind of an association between the Italians and the Russians. To an American, it's a bit foreign, like because you realize, like as you look through European history, you realize, well, oh look, the Europeans have done lots of business with the Russians over the years, right? Whereas over here, it was sort of like, oh no, we're not doing that. Those are the bad guys, so we're not doing any of that. But like. You see that the Brits imported, certain, maybe a lotta or two, and so did the French, and the French did some business with the Russians, and so did the Italians. But it seems more salient, more. It seems like the Italians on the left, a long time ago, were doing a lot more sort of business with the Russians. As I say, the Fiat factory, struck a major deal with a lot of guys over, and shipped a lot of parts to Russia, and so there's been a history of that. But now it's sort of more on the right, it seems like, but the historical association sort of remains. How does that? Yeah, can somebody kind of speak to that? Like how that sort of that comes to a surprise as an American when you don't know those things, and then you learn those things, and then how does it go from sort of the left is dealing with the Russians to now the right is dealing with the Russians? So you get my idea here.
So I try to keep it in 60 seconds and as focused as possible on the current ongoing war in Europe. So just as a 10 seconds background, Italy had for decades the largest communist party in the Western world for historical reasons dating back to the resistance during World War II, but that's besides the point.
Right, exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you. Yes.
That is the situation, until the 90s, essentially. I would add that formally since 1968, the Italian Communist Party, so after Prague Spring, has had distanced itself from Moscow. And it was not just window dressing, meaning that the leaders were often quite often making, being on the right side of history, but a very significant fringe of the Italian Communist Party, at least until the 90s, was sympathizing or more with the Soviet Union. So very significant,
Gotcha.
but not a majority. In the 90s, after the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, essentially a few things happened. The communists were not anymore the Soviet Union, so there was no reference there, at least in theory. We are seeing possible different outcomes right now that some could argue that are, some type of continuity, but that's besides the point. The Italian Communist Party changed its name and embarked itself in 3 decades of soul searching, rebranding, and ended up, frankly, in the last decade or so as being the largest and most politically influent NATO supporter in the Italian landscape. I do understand that this is a little bit difficult to digest for people that may not be super familiar with the Italian political landscape, but this is the case right now.
Can you repeat that? You said that they ended up being the largest and most significant what supporter?
NATO supporter.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha.
So at the same time, the right, which I resist a little bit calling right, because the right and left here are not very significant in terms of what they really mean. So essentially, imagine populist type of sympathizers of Mr. Orban and others that I will not name because that will instantly trigger internal politics of other countries. But you know which ones, right? So the situation in 2022 is that there are essentially two groups of political sympathizers of Putin. One is on the far left. There is, after all the splits, all the events of the last decades, there is still a very tiny entity called the Communist Party in Italy. It's very vocal, but has a fraction of a percentage of points, and actually did not elect anyone in parliament during the last election. So they are not really significant, other than cultural and possibly media reasons occasionally. The ones that are the largest block of Putin sympathizers are the ones on what you could call the populist illiberal right. I know some people might resist the illiberal label for some of these people, but when someone is openly sympathizing, openly asking Orban to be the model for the next Italian government, I frankly think that illiberal is the right label, because Orban himself said that he's aiming at what he calls an illiberal democracy, whatever that means. So I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that they are the illiberal ones. And those are the ones that are going to win the next elections.
That is insanely depressing, and but also I would like everyone to know, if you don't know already, which you probably do because you probably see. I understand that the United States is a you know, I understand that.
A republic.
Well, it is, but yes, we do not have
If you can keep it.
And fortunately, exactly, and fortunately,
yeah. If
fortunately, not completely ruled by a federal government willing to tax everybody into oblivion.
well, I would
Don't
just
go there,
say that.
Axel.
I would just say that there what I've seen just as an American, and I used to be a sort of a maybe right of center, a long time ago, kind of a right of center, just slightly right of center guy, sort of a Dwight Eisenhower guy, maybe, or a Theodore Roosevelt, if you guys get my references here. But and now I'm definitely. The thing is, you can take this too far. You can take this. What our government's done is over the past 30 years. Unfortunately, is they've taxed too little. You can tax too much. You can certainly do that. That is a thing. I'm willing to admit that. Government can get too big. It can get too onerous. It can get too regulatory and a bit, So that can happen. Of course it can. However, what we're faced with here in the United States is a party which Bertrand. What I wanted to say to Bertrand was that what he was talking about Orban. Now, the Republican Party has traditionally had a conference called the Conservative Political Action, Conference, CPAC. Now,
we are very familiar with that.
Okay, you guys know what I'm talking about. And so I don't have to tell you that Viktor Orban was the keynote speaker. They held it in Hungary, which was completely unprecedented. They've never held it in a foreign country before. I hope this made headlines. Okay, good. Yeah, I see. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And then he came to Austin. And it didn't make huge headlines in our country when I don't understand this. This is beyond my, capacity to understand why this wasn't in 142, point typeface on the front of the New York Times, which was like Republican Party holds, CPAC conference in Hungary. Viktor Orban, keynote speaker. That should have been like, alert, danger, Will Robinson, like. Yeah, everybody fucking needs to be. So apparently, like that didn't, happen, and so Biden made a speech last night. Unfortunately, Biden is not, the best orator on the planet, but he did the thing he needed to do. He said the things that needed to be said, and I'm proud to now. Of course, I call myself a Democrat, but just. You guys know what I'm talking about. You're following American politics. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just rambling. But it was very disturbing it was extremely disturbing to see, our party, host Viktor Orban as not just a speaker, not just any speaker, the keynote speaker. They made the effort to go to Hungary, have him as a keynote speaker. You know why? Because they couldn't. You know what wouldn't look good would be to have Putin as your keynote speaker. I mean, that is not. We're we're not headed down a good path. If that now. At least we're not in the. And I didn't know it was this bad in Italy. I didn't know like the three main. Like the guys that are going to be the coalition. If all the polls are right. And I don't know what Italians are doing. I guess they're looking in the other direction. I'm not going to speak up, right now for the integrity of the American electorate, because clearly we have let the world down, and let ourselves down and let everyone down. And I'm very sorry about that. It has been a rough 7 years, and I'm sorry we've put you through any of this, and ourselves. Anyway,
it's
I'll
okay,
shut
Brian.
up now. Yeah,
It's okay. Don't worry too much. There's more people here who
I know. Need to
stuff.
talk,
Don't
and I
worry.
need to shut
Worry
up.
not. Worry not. Worry not. I don't know what the order was. I'm gonna go to Bionade first. I think he's been waiting the longest, and then to Lewis, son of Lewis, and then to Puppy, who will set us all on the straight and narrow. Lewis,
And I
sorry.
will drop down.
Have a good night, Brian. Fall asleep to all of us rambling on as time goes on. Bionade.
So, yeah, I'm really impressed. Maybe not impressed, but I'm overwhelmed about the situation in Italy because I didn't know that.
Bionade, you've gone a little bit Dalek, and by Dalek I mean robotic-y
okay.
in the voice. No, still a robot.
Okay.
That sometimes happens when the reception's not the best.
Yeah, we keep it for later. Next one.
Lewis.
Yo, man. So, how you doing? So, Bertrand, thank you very, very much for that description of Italian politics. I just want to say, Italy, like a lot of places, has very much, politics is fluid. Coalitions are not permanent. I want to thank you for that. One thing I just want to add on that is, after World War II, you had this kind of consensus in Italy where you had this party that's no longer there. You had the Christian Democrats. There was a combination of people in the north and some folks in the south, and it kept things. They were kind of this blob in the middle, and they tack on a party here or there. But after the Cold War fell, and then after Maastricht, you had a much different dynamic. And I think that's the big point, is that Putin really does try to capitalize on the divisions, both on the left and the right. And one of the big things that's happened since the Cold War has been the European Union. And, the Maastricht Treaty, the Euro, all that stuff. And there are populist demagogues on the left and the right, both sides. The right seems to be more that, a little bit more than the left, I would say. And that the big thing is, they're never permanent. You have to, again, it's like you said before, if you can keep it. I would say in terms of America, we've had a bit of a populist run with things where you've had a very strong populist movement, and they've been railing against things. We will rail against Washington the way that a lot of populist politicians in Europe will rail against Brussels. I'm very struck by how similar those are. But I do think that every country is a little bit different. The United States is a republic. We have the 10th Amendment, where we have enumerated powers, where things that are not powers not given to the federal government are given to the states and the people. The Federal Republic of Germany, Axel, correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe the landers, it's the opposite. It's if they're not explicitly given to the landers, it remains with the federal government. Please correct me if I am misreading my constitutional.
No, it's generally correct. There's a derogation of power to the states in Germany. The way the constitution is set up, you could say that, yeah.
Yeah. But I think the point I want to make is, politics aside, these political coalitions are fluid. The United States is going through a realignment right now, where you see a lot of working class people that are moving to the Republican Party. The Republican Party used to be primarily white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. The Episcopal Church used to be called the Republican Party of Prayer. There is no, the last, they say demographers can jokingly say that the last Episcopal in the United States has already been born. My point is, these things are completely fluid, and things come and go. The things that are important are strong institutions, and the United States has had strong institutions. The European Union, I think, has done a very good job building institutions. I think the Federal Republic of Germany, post World War II, is an absolute miracle. It is one of the unsung great things that has happened, because you've taken a state, you basically, Prussia was, at least in name, wiped off the map, and you've had a good democratic republic, not perfect by any means, neither is the United States, but strong institutions. That's what counts. And if you have strong institutions, political coalitions can come together to make it work. And those institutions work in such a way that a dictator cannot make those things work. Sometimes they might try, but they generally fail because you have checks and balances. They're different, but long story short, these things are fluid, and I think we just need to keep our eye on the ball.
Thank you, Lewis. Such a calming words. I don't think that's enough to assuage our dear puppy, though, whom I think is looking at the very near term. And I think it's right for him to be looking at the very near term specifically, because the very near term is very decisive in Europe. And Italy, of course, is the third largest economy in Europe, in the European Union, the third largest country by population as well in the European Union, which matters a lot when it comes to council voting. Right, the qualified majority voting, the double qualified majority voting, where one of the qualified majority is also by the population of the country voting. It might matter a whole lot when it comes to decision making within the EU with regards to the help for Ukraine.
No, agreed. There could be some short-term challenges that you have there. I think that, again, the institutions, you've got European Union, you've got NATO. Those are institutions, unless they are incredibly radical and want to pull Italy out of the EU or pull Italy out of NATO. There's only so much that some of those crazy voices can do.
Puppy?
Yeah, the reason why I am looking for new terms, several new terms, in fact, right now, is that in the context of ongoing war in Europe, it seems to me that the conversation about right, quote-unquote right, and quote-unquote left feels very small to me. So in this space, we have people that prefer Milton Friedman and people that prefer John Maynard Keynes or whatever. We can talk about this, and it's a great topic of conversation. It does not really capture the essence of what is going on, and it should not really be what divides us. I can tell you, I mentioned sometimes that I can be probably happy both in Denmark and in the US that have, different taxation systems, and we can argue on which one is better. There is more than one way to skin a cat, right? So I know, however, that I would probably not be able to live a fulfilling life in any autocratic regime. Call it Russia, call it North Korea, call it Iran. And that is really what matters right now. There are some people, including in the West, that are sympathizers of autocratic systems. And those are not systems where I can feel I could live a fulfilling life. So in that sense, you can use your favorite horseshoe theory or whatever, but the fact remains that no matter what they say, no matter what symbol they carry, Glenn Greenwald and Noam Chomsky have more in common in that particular sense, which is a very important one, with the likes of Tucker Carlson and Josh Hawley. Sorry to bring the U.S. politics back, but in this case, I think it is justified.
Why? They only have respect for their own radicalism. And that's why they respect the simplification of the authoritarians so easily.
Yeah. Would you agree that this is left and right, and therefore probably we should not call it that much left and right because it's kind of a red herring? That is what I'm trying to get to.
I love it, especially when you said when you talked about Mr. Keynes and Milton Friedman, because one is a fantasist and the other one is a proper economist.
Yeah, I knew exactly where you were getting to, Axel.
Well,
So
now that's a
I have,
bit harsh. But Bertrand, I just want to say that's one of the most brilliant. I just wanted to pop up and say that was one of the most brilliant. It really was brilliant what you just said. The issue is not, and I mean it couldn't be more clear. The issue is not whether you're a Keynesian or Milton Friedman fan. That's not the issue right now. The issue right now is democracy versus fascism, democracy versus totalitarianism. It's not. It's not. Oh, gee, do you favor more or less taxation? That's not the. I don't care. I really don't. Like, as long as we live in a democracy, right? If you want to be a Friedman guy, great. If you want to be a Keynesian guy, great. Like, as long as I live in a democracy or a republic, a Republican democracy, whatever you want to call it, that's what I care about. Okay. Anyway, Bertrand, fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to shut up.
Thank you, Brian. Exactly, right? This is we want to be able to discuss all these things in a nice, calm, political court, as opposed to with tanks and artillery pieces and cruise missiles raining on cities, and that's what matters. That get rid of the threat of Russia against the freedom-loving, democracy-loving peoples first, and then we can hopefully, as liberty dots push ever further to the south and east in Ukraine, and get set priorities straight. Let's go to Lewis, and then to Antti, and then to Tom. Lewis.
So yeah, I just want to say you're exactly right when it comes to economics. The thing is, it's more than democracy.
So who is exactly
you have
right?
to have...
Who is exactly right when it comes to economics? The fantasist John Maynard Keynes, who supported depression in the US with his fantastic theories, or Milton Friedman, who was fair with the American capitalist system? Sorry, just asking.
Oh, no problem. I have my own personal theory on that, but I think from a business climate, if you have institutions that are at least set up with a Keynesian mindset, and they're consistent about it, I would rather have that than a lack of arbitrary institutions. And I think that's my point here, Axel, is I would rather have a European Union with good institutions that apply the law evenly, that have regulations that make sense. And I would rather have that in my federal government. I would rather have that in my local government, because I can operate in that. When you have a situation like you have in Russia, where yes, they did have some democratic items, but Yukos becomes Gazprom. This oligarch gets replaced by that oligarch. You have institutions that can be corrupted. We had somebody in this space a couple of months ago who relayed a story about an Australian friend who worked in Russia for many years, and they went to Australia, came back, and then they were not allowed in the country because somebody that they were working with wanted their job, bribed the people as far as immigration not to let them back into that. Those are the type of things that we can't have. Yeah, democracy is incredibly, incredibly important, but we also have to have strong institutions so that we can apply the rules so that people think that we have a level playing field. Now, when it comes to economics, I am an absolute Milton Friedman disciple. Axel, I will sit there and I will tell everyone to watch his story about how the pencil's made, but I'm more interested in, hey, if you're gonna be Keynesian, at least make it to where I know I'm working in a Keynesian mindset and regulations in mind against somebody else, rather than you put the foot on the scale against me.
Yeah, I don't think that the institutions are in doubt or even debated at this point in time. And I do think that whilst everybody can have views as to the effectiveness of, for example, institutions such as the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve, the quality of their analysis and their at times irresponsible action as to money supply, which is an argument I'm willing to have with anyone in terms of economics, and my friend Finance, who is on a regular basis here, and I discuss this pretty much daily. And we are both extremely unhappy with both the Fed and the ECB for various reasons, which actually create inflation more than anything else. But then again, there's also, of course, regulations which embed inflation and inflationary tendencies, and that is wishful thinking, utopian, authoritarian impact on energy prices, short-sightedness, and predominantly, as Dorman and I never cease to say here, a lack of education in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. The more you have of that, the less poorly science, the less wishful utopian thinking empowers us all, because the facts matter, specifically in economics and in building institutions. Because if you give institutions the right to tell you that red is blue and white is black, you lose. And that was not a matter of color of people, but a contrast. More like the Ministry of Information or the newspeak kind of stuff we have to sustain constantly.
Just follow real quick. No, I'm in complete agreement with you there, Axel. And then also at the end of the day, I think people vote with their feet. Where are people immigrating to? I know there's a lot of concern about in the United States about illegal immigration on the southern border, but you know what? They're coming here, and that says something about us. They're coming to the European Union. That says something about you. They're leaving Russia. That says something about them.
Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely right.
Yeah, you could have made the same argument to a troll at some point, pretty much along the same lines.
Siren alert
So from
update.
your country, how many
Odessa,
people go to Russia?
full
And how
alert.
many people want to
This
go
message
to
has been generated with municipal
Antti.
data.
Yes, hello. Good Saturday to everyone. So if you want to continue on this topic, I can wait because I have a separate thing I wish to note or comment.
In that case, Antti, let's jump to Tom and to Mark. I have to say something horrible. Something horrible has happened to me today, Antti. My icicle that cools my phone so that I can persist in moderating
Here Siren alert update.
The container
Odessa,
of it has broken.
full alert.
Rather flooded
This
my
message
desk
has
for
been
me.
generated
That's why I
with
was
municipal
quiet
data.
for about 5 minutes. We had to clean up the mess and source a second different icicle. And this just shows how important quality is in icicles, because I'm sure with an anti-icicle this would never have happened.
Antti, you were not donating icicles to cool Dorman's phone? What is it with you?
Oh, I'm sorry, there's a connection problem, Axel. I didn't hear what you said.
I thought that was the first Finnish lesson.
What? I didn't
Oh,
see
very
it. I
droll.
didn't hear a single double L nor double M in there. That's certainly not true. Sorry,
Here
let's get
Siren
back to
alert
serious
update.
things, and Tom will set
Odessa,
us straight.
full alert.
undoubtedly.
This message has been generated with municipal data.
Good morning, guys. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I'm walking the dog, so apologies if there's background noise. Yeah, I think sometimes when we get into the politics, I think people, because we're so familiar with the left-right distinction, I think we have the tendency, because most of us, well, particularly in the United States and United Kingdom, we're in pseudo two-party countries for the most part, as in there tend to be two big parties. And then in countries with proportional representation, it's a bit different. You end up with a lot more coalitions. But we're so familiar with the left-right axis in politics that I think we forget that there are other ways in which political views can really differ. So I've just tweeted an article for the Political Compass, which is a concept that looks, as well as like left and right economic axis, it looks at an authoritarian libertarian axis. And I think when you really get to grips with that and think about politics varying on two different axes, then you can start to understand this idea of the horseshoe theory and why sort of fascist and communist dictatorships actually have quite a bit in common. So I'll try to explain briefly my understanding of it. Essentially, I think that the left-right axis is the one that we all understand much better. People to the right of the political centre believe much more in sort of free markets and less intervention. People towards the left believe more in sort of socialist principles, bigger government, more government spending, that sort of thing. And, you can be a little bit right of centre, a little bit left of centre, or very right of centre, very left of centre, or quite centrist. And there's pros and cons to all of those positions, but I would say, personally, I'm slightly left of centre because I think you need a little bit of regulation. But people can agree to differ on those things, and that's fine. The things that people, I think, actually differ much more on nowadays is not so much the left-right axis as the authoritarian-libertarian axis. This is the area in which people vehemently disagree in intensely emotional arguments about just how we should allow society to be. So, again, briefly, the libertarian school of thought is that people should be allowed to do what they want to do. They should be allowed freedom. And I think any of us that back freedom are, to some extent, a little bit on the libertarian axis. However, the authoritarian axis is that there should be hierarchies, there should be rules, people should do as they're told to a certain extent. And again, you can be very authoritarian, very libertarian, etc. And there are pros and cons to these things. If you're completely libertarian, if for example we were completely libertarian in this space, we'd have no moderators, no putting of hands up, and it would probably just degenerate into shouting matches and things like that. So, sometimes again, it comes back to what Axel says about the centre must hold. It's really useful to understand the pros and cons of these extremes and to try and avoid them. Now, I think one of the things that's happening politically a lot at the moment is that authoritarianism is on the rise. We talk about the Nazis, the German Nazis of the 1930s and 1940s as being a far-right party. But in fact, they were a very, very libertarian party, and I'm sure Axel can either correct me or agree with me on some of this. They did have some social policies, such as paying German women to have more children, that are not particularly a very right-wing economic policy. It's actually quite a socialist policy. In fact, even the name of the Nazi party, the National Socialists, was intended to appeal to both ends of the spectrum. When we describe a party as being populist, what we mean is that they tend to have a number of right-wing policies, but also a number of left-wing policies. And in some cases, this can be economically really unsustainable because you might, for example, have low taxes and high spending. It's very politically popular, but it tends to be bad because it tends to indebt your country. But sometimes if you do that and you combine it with authoritarianism, you've got a situation politically where you can appeal to people at both ends of the spectrum of left and right, but also say things should be this way, these are the rules we should have in society. And at a time when people are angry, authoritarianism is more appealing. I'm starting to ramble, so I'll pause for a little bit.
I don't think you're rambling, Tom. You're really, really spot on. I think that is the essence of it. I feel the need to mention here that Mussolini himself, the guy that invented the word fascism, he was a socialist before becoming, the inventor of the other name. So, and historically there is it's a bit anecdotal, but I would say shifting from the extreme right, illiberal extreme right, to the extreme left, and vice versa, is likely to be a more frequent phenomenon rather than people that were hotheads and all of a sudden became fans of liberal democracy.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the things about something that I think extreme libertarians and extreme authoritarians have in common is that they don't like being told what to do. Now, I think to some extent, no one likes being told what to do. But I think if you're more centrist in terms of libertarianism and authoritarianism, you understand that some structure, some authority is really useful, but that too much is bad. And so you accept being told what to do sometimes, and indeed you might tell people what to do sometimes, but not all the time. Whereas the difference between the libertarians and the authoritarians is that the libertarians don't want to be told what to do, but they also believe, which I think is quite an honest belief, that means they've not really got any rights to tell people what to do. The difference between a left libertarian and a right libertarian is that a left libertarian would say we should have freedom to do what people want to do, but also we should look after them if they mess up socially. Whereas the right libertarian would say people should be allowed to do what they want to do, but if they mess up, they have to deal with the consequences. And when it comes to the more libertarian side, I'm probably very, very slightly right libertarian, because there are consequences and people need to accept them. So I find it very intellectually honest as a sort of right-wing view. The problem with the authoritarians when it comes to this is they don't want to be told what to do, but they bloody do want to tell other people what to do. And so what happens is you end up in a situation where people are elected because they detest the views of the other party, which may be more libertarian. And so you end up with people saying that they're defending freedom, and then, for example, I don't know, stripping people of their rights because they personally don't like the rights that people are exercising. And I won't give examples, because if I do, we'll get embroiled in domestic politics of one country or the other. But the point here, and this is where it brings it back to Russia, is that fascist dictatorships and communist dictatorships, even though economically they might be quite different, or in terms of authoritarianism, they are exactly the same. They're a state that oppresses people's rights, restricts their freedom, and thinks that that's the right thing to do. And if you're part of like an elite that benefits from that system, you may well think it's the right thing to do. I think the problem is that when people are angry, and when politics of both the left and the right economically are failing, I think authoritarianism becomes possibly more attractive. And I think the rise of fascism in Italy and Germany in sort of post-Weimar Republic kind of environment probably backs that view up. Anyway, I am starting to ramble again.
Papi, Lewis, and then we'll go to Antti for whatever change Antti has. Papi?
No, actually, I frankly agree pretty much 100% with Tom. So I would have added something about different styles of libertarianism, but that gets too much into the weeds. So please go ahead. I will shut up.
Thank you, Lewis.
Yeah, no, Tom, I don't think that you were rambling. I think you're spot on, and populism does combine that, and that's what I think you're seeing. And it's not even just, all right, should I be told what to do? But is it my local council? Is it the federal government? Is it the local government? And I think that's one of the big challenges that we have as well. Is okay, we agree that this is something the government should do. And in the United States, we have this all the time. And that is this a local issue? Is this a state issue? Is this a federal issue? And I won't go into examples out there. Very, very good examples of that in the news here in the United States. And so it can get even more to where you are just like, all right, we'll do it. But I think it's that guy that's in charge of our entire 330 million people that should do it, not my person down here in my state capital that's 200 kilometers away from where I am. So, how your government is set up and how those institutions set up. The last thing that I will say is the one thing I'm very concerned about in part of these realignments is the lack of social connectedness. I think that there's been some study done in the United States specifically around, like for instance, in the Republican primary, we had voters that supported Trump, and one of the big things that, all right, here's a very conservative person who absolutely cannot stand Donald Trump. Here's somebody that may be conservative that absolutely loves Donald Trump. The big difference between the two is the one that really liked Donald Trump did not have a lot of ties to their local community or the local institutions, the social connectedness factor. And I think that's one of the things that I'm very concerned about, is that these authoritarians can prey upon that and use them as their shock troops, so to speak. And so I think that's something we all have to be vigilant about, and that is, are people engage in the local community? Do you know your neighbor? Some of those very basic fundamental things that we may take for granted, like I know my neighbors, they're great people, they have goats, and they come over and they eat out of my garden sometime. Basic things like that are incredibly important, and above and beyond what your political views are, because you can sit there and hate somebody if they have a different political view, but if they're your neighbor and they have a different political view, at least you can have a civilized discussion about it.
Well, there you have it. We're yet again, whilst you are addressing the perfect point, it is still the symptom. The lack of connectedness is a long-standing trend and result of exactly the kind of, I'm sorry, communist, KGB-induced insubordination of Western values in the West, trying to disconnect families, communities, people from their faith, people from their attachment to their local communities has always been their trope. This is, by the way, what Stalin was preaching by means of his violence. Try to dissect the society, mix it up, constantly keep them in fear. In 1984, you can read it. This is what Aldous Huxley also reminds us of. This is what authoritarians do. And I'm sorry to say that, my dear fellow friends on the Democratic side of the spectrum, this is what a large part of the American left has been doing since the 1960s. You have contributed to it, and the KGB has sponsored it, and this is one part of the result. And populism of today is a consequence of this disconnectedness. It's a backlash to the centralization, which is the result of the disconnectedness. Instead of being in the center, being good neighbors, friends, arguing, being a good Democrat and a good Republican, and talking with each other, and doing things on a municipal, on a state level, on a county level, whatever, people project authority onto the federal government as a result of their disconnectedness. You have exactly the right point, but it started, the pendulum swung on the left, now it has come to roost on the populist right, and we in the middle have to deal with the impact. Thank you very much.
Antti wants to... Antti?
Antti, please.
So you're done with the previous topic?
Yes.
Okay. And I hope you're reading me 5 by 5.
5 by 5.
Excellent. So the following is inspired what Doman mentioned about Russian air defense some hours ago. So here goes. I gave a missile to the air defense. They put it in their book. Decided early next minute, my missile came right back. Return to Russia. Coordinates unknown. No such targets. No such foes. We had an army. A roaring bear. I set all the targets, but my missiles keep flying back. So then I sent it to the Pantsers and sent it Special D. But bright and early next morning, it flew right back at me. Return to Russia. Coordinates unknown. No such targets. No such foes. This time I'm gonna launch it myself. Drop it right in Ukraine's lap. And if it flies back the very next moment, then I'll understand. Return to Russia. Coordinates unknown. No such targets. No such foes. Return to Russia. Return to Russia. Return to Russia. Thank you very much.
That was fucking awesome! The king has resurfaced!
Can we please have
this is an extra snippet on Spotify.
Already on it. Actually, Antti, would it be all right with you?
Air siren alert update.
Would it be all right
Odessa,
with you?
all
this
clear.
Is the opening
This
credits
message has
to
been
all the
generated
future
with
Spotify
municipal
releases?
data.
Oh, jeez. I started something I didn't understand. Why not? I mean, we're all here for Ukraine, so I mean, yeah, why not?
Excellent. We might have someone contacting you with requesting a repeat, maybe with even better recording capabilities, but definitely something
But
along those lines.
please do it in a way
Air
that
siren alert update.
the
Odessa,
copyright holders
all
of
clear. This message has been generated
Presley's
with
estate
municipal
won't
data.
repossess my whole
I don't think it was good enough for that. Sorry
Excellent.
to say.
Excellent.
I think it was just limited enough to be able. Right? Yes, Brian, you're in Tennessee.
I would
nearby to the location
love.
of the king.
Boy, would I love to say, literally as a. It kind of blows my mind a little bit that I'm an old Elvis fan. My introduction to rock and roll was through Elvis Presley, and anyway, I'd just like to say the fact that you were like, it kind of blows my mind that you just paraphrased an Elvis song and everybody got it. Like all over the world, like everybody got it. Like nobody didn't get it, and you knew that everybody was going to get it because everybody's heard this song. And I actually, as an American Tennessean person, would say I would not have guessed that many people from that many countries would have gotten that parody, and not to mention that it was a fantastic parody, and that you're trolling the Russians, and that's fantastic, and I'm glad to hear it. So anyway, as like I am from Tennessee. Like my mom, went to Elvis's house, and got a napkin, an autograph on a napkin, and I'm from Tennessee. This is what you do. You love Elvis. So like, it really makes it like the fact that you can use some Elvis to bolster your morale in fighting these sons of bitches who, anyway, just saying. Kind of touching. It's kind of touching. It actually makes me feel proud to be not just American, but a Tennessean. And I don't want to get too all flag wavy over here, but Slava Ukraini. How's that?
Heroin Slava.
Smert Furhan. No, sorry, that went wrong, didn't it?
Slava Nazi.
It went absolutely right.
Okay.
Couldn't have gone more right.
Thank you.
Well, we all knew you had it in you, but now that you've used up all your singing allocation for the lifetime of one Finnish male, what are you going to do next?
Of course, Yevhen Polka is excluded from the allocation. That's on top.
I don't know, I'm just, I'm too drained to think clearly right now.
Über.
Lewis.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, and Brian, that was indeed awesome. It is unfortunate that the only tour overseas that Elvis Presley did was in the United States Army. I think he would have been really really celebrated around the world. I wish he could have done more than just be in the United States and Canada when it came to his touring. And also just one point of personal pride. My father is from a small town about 50 kilometers outside of Tupelo, Mississippi, and the good people of Mississippi claim Elvis Presley.
As they well should, and he's right. Elvis Presley grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, and it's a comment on our country that the story as it goes. It's a comment on our country to say this because the story goes that Elvis was so poor, his family was so poor that they had to live in the black section of town. So that's a comment, right? Isn't it? That's it's a thing to say about our country. Now, who
is today's Secretary of Defense? Who is one of the most famous 82nd Airborne warriors?
Yes, no, you're right. And who was the President of the United States from 2008 to 2016? I mean, you don't even have to say it because we did it, and we're getting better. We're getting better. It's we did. I didn't see this setback coming, but we're going to get better. Anyway, I'll stop there. But it's heartening to hear somebody sing like a parody of Return to Sender, and everybody all over the world gets the joke. That was just great. That was just fantastic. I know us Americans can be a bit provincial. So forgive me for that, but and I've traveled the world. I've been to Europe. I get it, but I still, it still was very heartening and touching. So thank you, Auntie. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's really fantastic. Erland, welcome.
Hello. Okay, first I want to say thank you to all of your hosts and everyone who's organizing this amazing space. And then I wanted to comment on this previous discussion about the democracy axes that Tom and Ben were talking a lot about. And my background is that I studied in politics and international relations in Rome. I am Norwegian, and that is quite two different worlds. And I recognize a lot of what Tom was talking about when it comes to this authoritarian versus libertarian axis. It's not new. I remember this plot scheme that Sartori was of course one of the political philosophers and scientists that we were studying. He wrote a lot about these things, and Italy has very surprising approach to all of this, especially when it comes to the legality. They have this thing called la legalità. Everyone is talking about, especially if they meet someone like from a Scandinavian country, they're like, oh, everyone is following the law there. You have good rules. Everything is well functioning. And here in Italy, no one respects the law, etc. But at the other hand, and I was very interested in that, so I wrote a few papers on it and was studying why people in Italy tend to have problems with the regime or with the government. And one of the things that I noticed is that when I asked people in surveys is that they tend to get some kind of pleasure when they can violate some law in their benefit. For instance, a very small example is in the traffic. If they can park illegally and get away with it, or if they can somehow get some money from the government or not pay taxes and get away with it. It's like something they brag about. On the other hand, the same people tend to be very upset about how the state functions and that people don't follow the rules, especially if they're immigrants. And these trends are now getting to the very surface. That was 5 years ago. I was there studying, and the environment was very eerie. Like I remember fascists popping out everywhere. I was dreaming of living there, but after a few political events and future of the country didn't look so bright, I decided going back to Norway. And now when I'm looking at the political environment in Italy, I'm very depressed. At the same time, I believe that there is a possibility that a lot of these people that on the polls say they're going to vote for these extreme fascists that are, in the historical continuation of the fascist party, the Brothers of Italy, and I think when they arrive to the polling station, I think a lot of them will be scared because Italians, they love their freedoms. I don't think they want to live under the fascist regime, and I don't think they trust these people. But they're fed up with the corruption and the absolute incompetence of some of the people that have been ruling. And in Italy, one of the big problems is that the incompetence and the corruption, you will find it everywhere. You will find it on the left, you will find it on the right, you will find it in the 5-star movement that was purely talking about anti-corruption and get this bad establishment, corrupt politicians out, etc. So they have a very big mess there, and that is also one of the big scares. They talk about following the rules. They want strong leaders. Some of these people, but at the same time, they would never like to live under it. So yeah, it's spot on, Tom. Thank you.
Tom? Oh, thank you, Ellen. That's very kind of you. I think my views are informed very often by a point of view that extreme viewpoints in general, I feel, tend to be both harmful and wrong. If you subscribe to the extreme of, let's say, the political left, because I criticise that more being somewhat on the left myself, if you think that every person that is conservative or Republican and votes that way is wrong and that absolutely nothing in that political philosophy is of value, then you're basically saying that you think you know better than 50% of the population, approximately. And that simply tends to be false, for one thing, because I think really on both right and left, and in authoritarianism and in libertarianism, I think there are good reasons to hold some of those views and bad reasons to hold some of those views. I think there are good ideas, and I think there are mistaken ideas, and I think there are ideas that in moderation are a really good idea, that in excess become really bad or have unintended consequences, as I think Axel likes to point out with regards to, for example, market regulation. So I think when it comes to the sort of left-right authoritarian libertarian thing, I think sometimes what we need to realise is that when we are opposed to a political party or opinion, sometimes the things that we're opposed to are not actually the left-right economic axis as much as the authoritarianism versus libertarianism. So, I mean, if we look at the Soviet Union, they were both very, very, very far left. They were communists and extremely authoritarian. They were a vicious, vicious, evil dictatorship that killed more people in Gulag and Holodomor and purges than died in World War II, if I'm not mistaken. I might have got my stats wrong on that. But the point is, people often hate them because they were communists, because of the economically left-wing, radical far-left agenda. And they assume sometimes that all the murdering was part of that. Whereas, okay, maybe they go hand in hand, because if you tried to have a completely democratic communist system, someone would vote them out and you'd end up with a more right-wing party and it would bring it back to the centre. But I would say that the evils of it were more to do with the authoritarianism than the, failed planned economy of communism. I think if you look at Russia now, they're really not that communist. They've got a large banking sector, got a massive amount of oligarchs. There's really no sort of communist ideal. They might occasionally cosplay it being communist to try and get some of the old folks to remember the good old days. But they're really not. And I think if we look at China, and I'm pretty sure Jingu would back me up on this, the Chinese now are really not communist. They have a massive banking sector. Yes, they've got massive state ownership, but they've got massive private ownership as well. It's really not the extreme economic far left that it used to be. They're just doing Russian-flavoured capitalism and Chinese-flavoured capitalism. And that's not a dig on capitalism, by the way. I think they've realised it's the only game in town. And what we're really opposed to these people on is the fact that they're fascists, really, in the sense of being dictatorships, in the sense of being not democratic, in the sense of killing or imprisoning anyone that opposes them politically, in the sense of not giving people freedom. And I think that's part of why people flee to the West as well. It's not just the economic system, which is better over here, but it's the authoritarianism as well. And I think if we are able to make those distinctions more in our political conversations, it might be less polarizing. We might avoid getting into some of the black and white thinking and false dichotomies here. But I think actually we are really united in terms of wanting freedom, because I think ultimately there's people of the political left and the political right in this space, and we're all united because we want freedom from the people of Ukraine and for them not to be victims of the authoritarian evil dictatorship that is Russia. So I'll shut up again, but thanks for your kind comments.
But when you say China, please also be aware that Mao followed the same model of dissolving society first, which is an old school utopian communist authoritarian approach. Having dissolved the society, having mixed it up, having killed social cohesion, he then deigned to create a society which could succeed. He failed to be able to do so. He was too old. His follower elite, his crack troops, then messed it up completely. And it took Deng Xiaoping to turn the rubble of a dissolved society in what is a Han fascist old school empire. And that's what I'm saying. If you allow communist utopianism to dissolve the social connectedness of society, you end up with fascism, which is why communism and every left-wing idea should always be tested against what it does to the future.
Yeah, I guess I agree with you that communism both failed economically and in terms of dictatorship was just absolutely brutal and led to the death and destitution of millions. So there's no disagreement there. I think that the evil of the dictatorship might be somewhat...
They like their utopianism. I get that.
Yeah,
but you have to get rid of that shit.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying, Axel, is that it's probably partly as a result of the left-wing ideology being so extreme that the only way it could be put into practice was by force. Because, any democracy...
Look at the left-wing now. Yeah. Look at the energy policy dreams of the climate change overusing entities. The preaching, instead of acting like a liberal capitalism with foresight, planning, and good incentives. The authoritarianism of the left, that's exactly what drives populism. Centralization of power drives populism. That's exactly my point.
At extremes, I would completely agree with you. But the problem is because the extreme is awful, terrible, really bad. The problem is you can throw the baby out with the bathwater. So let me give you an example. I don't think the market has succeeded in developing nuclear power to the extent that it could. And I think it's perhaps to do a bit with just short-termism. People are thinking about the next quarter and, profit for their shareholders. I think that the only way we're going to get nuclear power is with government intervention. And arguably, that's
we
a
lost
more...
nuclear power in continental Europe because of intervention by governments. Governments imbued by the sense of fear and panic in Germany, thanks to the KGB and the Stasi. That's my point. If the market were left, it would find better solutions more quickly. But the government stands in that way. That's my point. Look at which government is doing what at the moment. They are now happy in Germany that they're only phasing out 2 out of 3. They're not even talking on a federal level to reconnect the 3. It's 2 state governments, thank you, states' rights, very important, who can balance this out. It is the left-wing authoritarian thinking of a projected utopian future which holds them hostage at this point in time. And we must say so because it leads to the populist and fascism which undermines the rest of society. That's why I'm preaching the center must hold. Because the people are blind on the left, utterly blind about the incentive systems. They believe they can do everything. No, you can't. The facts are against it. Life is significantly more.
I think you're overstating some of the.
Yeah. Can I finish? Sorry, just briefly. So, Axel, I think we all agree that those far left policies of communism are a complete and total failure. But I think when it comes to nuclear power, if it was the case that the market left to itself would lead to the most nuclear power, and that intervention and state ownership would lead to the least nuclear power, why is it that the country with the most electricity generation is France, where the nuclear industry, if I'm not mistaken, is at least partially state-owned? And where is the most free market?
You know exactly why. Come on, Tom, you know exactly why. It's a counter move. France wanted to be independent from American influence and knew that its own sovereignty was at risk if it were not actually developing nuclear power. That was a very clear design. It comes out of a policy paper by Pompidou's assistants who very clear-sightedly did this. At the same time, when Günther Guillaume, the Stasi spy, was with the long-praised and much heralded Willy Brandt. That's how it came to be. And they were warned by Richard Nixon, and they didn't heed the warning because they didn't listen to the Americans.
So clearly there are other reasons as well, Axel. It's not simply to do with state ownership.
No, but this is the main impetus on political level. You're talking about the primacy of policy, but you're avoiding that the grand arch of policy was bent by certain political minds at that time when policy mattered more. Today it matters less. I give you this. I concede you this. There's NGOs, media, there's many more people having influence. We're talking about it. But at that time, the Chancellor of Germany had a bigger impact on policy. At that time, Pompidou had a bigger impact on French policy. And Mitterrand carried this onwards. Giscard d'Estaing was the weakest amongst them. Fine, fair enough. But this is how it went. This is how French nuclear policy developed to retain sovereignty for the French own path. I grant them that. Smart. Well done, you. But it's the primacy of policy which made the mistake in Germany, not the primacy of industry.
So, Axel, clearly, obviously, there are a lot of other countries that are more left of centre or more socialist who don't have nuclear power industries state-owned, at least partially, like the French. So it's clear that it's not simply, being more state policy or state-owned or government interventionism leads to a large nuclear power industry, But, conversely, where's the country that is much, much more free market that has loads and loads of nuclear power? I don't think we've got the counterexample either. So the point I'm making is not that, one side of the spectrum...
from nuclear power.
Sorry? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Base load in the United States is from nuclear power.
Yeah, I think it's about 20%.
Absolutely no. It's
I think it's about 20%. It's the same as the UK.
It's about 20%. In France,
that's base load. That's base load.
Well, baseload is a misleading term, but okay, I understand what you're saying. The baseload
Yes,
nuclear
you have different
power.
regional grids.
Well, we do, but if you want to call baseload sort of your general coal, natural gas, and nuclear power, in Tennessee, it's about I would. Well, it's it's the vast majority, but you're calling baseload is a misleading term because it's not as though you Axel, you are not are you are a Baltic snow tiger. You are not German, or are you?
I am German, yes, of course.
Okay, so your country generates more power from solar voltaic panels as a percentage of its power than most other countries on the planet, and you are
which has driven it's but that's wrong.
Well,
it's completely wrong because we're dependent on French baseload capacity in the grid, and we're dependent on our nuclear power. And the current overly sponsored and therefore driven by taxation, completely nutty solar power setup which we have, which is based on old solar panels, completely over-subsidized. It's completely wrong. It's the wrong direction. We know it.
You may think so.
Are cutting into the. No, I know it. It's the problem is technology. We are in the wrong spot for that. For heat pumps and decentralized solar power, we need different film technology. We're preventing the innovation from coming into the game in order to help distributed households. We're forcing them into different contracts by different incentive systems in Germany, which is completely useless.
Axel,
so we're doing the wrong things.
Can I suggest to you that that Tom is suggesting to you, and I would suggest the same thing, that you're seeing the left in everything that might be
on the contrary,
a government.
Not at all. I haven't talked. No. Just because you see a little lens of this now today, because this is a concentrated issue, you should not take it as pars pro toto. I'm highlighting this because we were talking about the large political trends which have impacted and impaired energy policy in the two main continental European nations. And this is what Tom highlighted, and I've highlighted as to where the trend came from. That it's not left or right, it's actually sovereignty, French in this case, versus an undermined federal state, Germany, on the other end.
Okay, well, I mean a broader sense. I mean, in the sense of what we were talking about earlier. You seem to be saying, well, if this is what left-leaning ideology leads to, and you
it predicates dissolution of societies. Yes.
Well, see, this is what I mean: is that you're seeing, and you're not wrong. There's an element to what you're saying that is true. There is. Yes, these things do happen. The Russians do try to do these things. They have tried to do these things for many decades. They have tried to put cracks in Western society for many decades. And we can see it now, I think, a bit more clearly. And it's not untrue. It's true. And what used to, and I want to just tell you, like the thing that made me a sort of a little bit more right wing when I was a kid, teenager, if you will, was, I would go over to some friend's house, and he would have like liberal parents, and they would say, "Oh, the Soviet Union, they're no better than us. They're no different from us." And I used to think, what is the matter with you people? Like, how do you not know, like, how bad the Soviet Union is? Like, how can you possibly sit here in your comfortable house in suburban America and think for 1 second that, like, you live in a country which is guilty of the same crimes and the same totalitarian nightmare, which is the Soviet Union. You have no clue. Like, and I didn't, I was 12, 13. I knew better, and these people didn't know better. So, but I think what Tom is saying is, and I'm really, I'm sorry, I don't mean to ramble. I just want to point out that Tom is putting this this thing on an axis, and he's trying to say, and it's very useful, and I really like it, because this is something that and thank you, Tom, because this is something I've been trying to think about for a long time. I've been like, well, it's, and my axis has always been like, well, it's, whatever. But, a long time ago, I remember thinking like, oh, okay, and I do want to say this. There was this one time I just realized I was in a convenience store, and I was like, I don't know why I was in a convenience store, but I realized, in the robber baron times in the United States, 5 guys owned all the stuff, and in the Soviet Union, the 5 guys own all the stuff. They just claim it in the name of the people. The 5 guys that owned all the stuff in 1890 in America, didn't claim it for the people. They didn't say, "Oh, this is for the people." They didn't, and they also didn't run the government. They didn't own the government. The government and those guys were not the same thing. Anyway, so I think Tom's axis of libertarian versus authoritarian and left versus right economically is a very useful way to think about. It's still two-dimensional. I think we could even go a little further. We could, on oscilloscopes, you have a z-axis, which is backwards and forwards. So perhaps we could put a bit more, I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, this is just me rambling.
No, we did this. No, it's fine, Brian. It's absolutely okay. But you haven't been there when we had these discussions in late March, throughout April and May already.
No,
So
I'm sorry. I haven't.
No, it's not a problem because I wouldn't want to regurgitate it. But Tom was so kind as to summarize a couple of very key points, and I agree with him, by the way, on many, if not most of them. It's just that the fantasism or the fantasy land of Rousseau's utopianism has never died out in the left-leaning, both European champagne socialist circles as well as in America. And this is why you have it. And as long as the New York Times does not apologize for Mr. Durante and gives those 2 Pulitzers back, I can't take them seriously. I'm sorry. Same goes for WAPO. I really cannot take these people seriously. There's individual journalists who are great, but I can't take the rest of the institution seriously if they cannot actually live up to the fact that their policies, or the policies they've projected for many, many moons, have been conducive to this failure as much as the irate peasant reform of populism.
Well, I think you're seeing left-wing utopianism.
Rousseau inspired, yeah, it's left-wing utopianism.
I think you're seeing it. Well, all I'm saying is, I think you're seeing, as you say, the phantasm of it. In a bit too, I think you're seeing it in too many cracks and crevices. I don't think it's everywhere you're seeing it. I think you're being a bit too alarmist about that. But anyway,
let me give you an example which you will understand easily. Okay, fine. The EU, over the past couple of years, has enacted reforms and has ordained them, which we just barely escaped by means of the French and a couple of others, fortunately pushing nuclear energy generation and its research and development to be a so-called green, meaning therefore decarbonizing technology. That's not a surprise for any physicist. Trust me, it isn't. It's actually the ultimate technology in that regard.
No, of course it generates zero CO2.
Hear me out. Yeah, hear me out. What it has done, however, is beforehand go for this United Nations-inspired, completely, utterly bereft of any sense ESG compliance program, and has forced its banks in Europe to fulfill this compliance scheme in order to deny financing for other technologies and a whole host of things. And this is how, by means of regulating, in this case, over-regulating by, I'm sorry, wokish left-wing utopianism, over-regulating the financial sector for political aims on a long-term regulatory scale. And the damage this has already incurred in Europe is seen in the way the ECB has to react to quantitative easing too. It is seen in the denial of finance for energy-intensive industries, Please have a look at what ArcelorMittal had to do in Germany this week, i.e. go on furlough for two of the largest, most intensely well-operating, capital-intense, perfectly good steel plants, churning out products which are absolutely vital for Europe and the world, because the energy costs are too high. And they're not too high necessarily only because of the war. No, on the contrary, quite the contrary. It's a long-term self-inflicted wound which has festered over because our wonderful utopianism
Now, do you think?
has
Now,
carried
wait.
through into this.
Now, hang on.
Biggest failure in 100 years.
But you're attributing this to utopianism and left-wing
It is.
utopianism.
It comes from the left wing of a
Well,
large part
now,
of the
can I
European
suggest?
champagne socialists and Greens. You should get to know the green movement in Europe, and then you can find this out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I do not know those guys. But can I suggest very briefly that so in the United States, what you see is a lot of the opposite. What you see is the consequences of the government not investing in infrastructure and not regulating, certain energy production. We could be much further along. And all I'm trying to say is this: I'm trying to say that it might, you're seeing it through the lens of this left-wing utopian thing, and you're saying, and this is
I'm
very
just highlighting one thing. I don't see the world through one lens. I'm trying to give you an answer, an appropriate answer to the concepts which were presented, which were lacking exactly that clear-cut argument that we are creating our own problems in Europe. And we are predicating populist fascist reactions, which, by the way, Bertrand's puppy and I are so worried about in Italy, as a consequence of populists usurping power on the predicament the Europeans have actually created for themselves.
I see what you're saying. Yes. Okay. Well, in the United States, it looks a little bit different. Just through this, I see what you mean. You don't want. You're a mod. You feel that you're a moderate, and you don't want overregulation and government sort of. If I could say, like Leviathanism, getting people all riled up and creating a populist reaction, which then foments sort of an extremist kind of result at the polls. No, I understand what you mean.
This is not a bad summary or précis of it, because it's certainly one underlying trend in it. But we are creating, in a heterogeneous Europe, we are allowing the seeds of discord be sown.
I'll just say that. Okay. Listen, you're not wrong. Like, there is an element of that in all of Western politics. Yes, the Russians have tried to do these things. That is undeniable. To what degree, though? I would just ask you, and I would encourage you to try to calibrate your reaction, to that very real thing, to its actual degree, which I think is a bit, I would say, much less. And I don't blame anyone right now for miscalibrate, for saying, oh, look what's happening. Look at the extremism. Yes, there is extremism. Yes, the Russians have been doing this for a long time. Yes, I get it. And we have been attacked too. I mean, listen, I just had to put up with 4 years of the fascist guy. So, and we all did, and we're still having to put up with him. So I get it. I know that was Russian intervention, and I know that they've been doing this for years. They come over here. We have to be alert. It's not that we don't. You're not wrong, but I'm just asking you to not look at everything that is. And look, I don't blame you for being you're in the EU, and I get that the EU can be very, very. I get it. Like, it's clear that the EU it wants to be the EU. It wants to standardize all the things. Not an easy thing, between 22 countries or whatever it is. So I get that, but it's not easy here, in the United States. So it can't possibly be easy there. But I just encourage you to calibrate your reaction to the actual threat, which I don't think is as grave. I don't think that everything that is on the that is on the left
siren alert
is some
update.
sort of utopian.
Donetsk,
Yes,
full alert.
There is
This
utopian
message has
thinking
been
on the
generated
left.
with
There is an
municipal
element
data.
of that. You're correct. You're not wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I think you're reacting to an outsized. I think you're over. I think it's a bit hyperbolic. Your sort of perception of how much of this sort of communist utopian. And listen, I'm the, I'm a guy that lives in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm on your side, buddy. I don't like communists. Let me tell you. And I've been to Russia, and I've seen the results of communism. I've been to Eastern Europe. I've seen the results of communism. I get it. Like, we don't want that. That's not what we want. That sort of utopian thinking is very dangerous.
Siren alert update.
But
Donetsk,
please don't
full alert.
mistake.
This message has been generated with municipal
It might be the wrong
data.
government policy, but don't just think that behind every bad government regulation there's some sort of utopian thinking. I don't think that's commensurate with the degree of the threat. And I'm talking to you as an ardent anti-communist American guy living in the southeastern United States. You know what I'm saying here? So that's what I'm saying. All right, I'm going to shut up here.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to step in and I'm going to end this conversation because we're getting nowhere, and we've been getting nowhere for an hour and a half now. Because that's where we tend to get when we go down the path. That's all right. And let's instead maybe talk about the Danube Commission. Who'd like to talk about the Danube Commission instead? Who knows what the Danube Commission is? Well, I'll tell you somebody who knows what the Danube Commission is. Danube Commission, and that is General Ben Hodges, a friend of the space, definitely knows what the Danube Commission is because he's currently participating in a conference in Bucharest on the Danube Commission, among other, and the future of Romanian-American cooperation in the area. And currently, they're talking about an hour ago, they've been talking about the Danube Commission and why is Russia still a member of the Danube Commission? Now, the Danube Commission was established a long time ago to take care of the varying interests of various countries that form the Danube Basin and the border, the Danube River, through which the Danube River flows, on its way from Germany through Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Serbia, forming the border partially between Serbia and Romania, then the border between Bulgaria and Romania, and eventually the border between Romania and Ukraine. For historical reasons, one of the countries that is a part of the Danube Commission is also Russia, because for some reason it managed to get the successor status, even though it doesn't actually border the Danube, hasn't for a very long time. Oh, sorry, I missed Moldova. Moldova has a few hundred meters of the Danube there as well. Sorry, for some reason, somehow, Russia, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, managed to get successor status and maintained its position on the Danube Commission, even though it isn't actually on the Danube. And right now, as the Danube is being shown to be ever more important, truly ever more important as a route for navigation, a route for trade, and a route for the exports of Ukrainian grain and other products, as well as imports into Ukraine, there is really showing the strategic wrong-footedness of having allowed Russia to stay on the Danube Commission, in part governing the rules of transit up and down the Danube, and especially up the Danube, for no good reason whatsoever. Ben, what do we know about the importance of grain and the importance of the Danube River for the export of Ukrainian grain and other agricultural products and the imports into Ukraine? Okay, Ben's looking at the numbers, but I can tell you the numbers. In the past month alone, 1.6 million tons of agricultural products were exported out of Ukraine through the Danubian ports. And I'm not even sure that includes the port of Galatz. That might just be Reni and Izmail, which are in Ukraine, rather than Galatz, which is in Romania. That is a very large proportion of total Ukrainian exports of agricultural products over the last month. 1 in 3 tons, I guess. A third of all agricultural exports from Ukraine this past month actually went through the Danube, making it an eminently important export route. And for a country that is not a friend to any civilized country, seemingly Russia, to still be maintaining its position on the Danube Commission, there's no reason for it whatsoever, and I think General Ben Hodges is quite right in raising the issue, and perhaps we collectively should raise this issue as well. Antti?
Yes, so I was wondering, if you want to continue on the Danube Commission, I can wait for a bit for my question.
No, go ahead, Antti.
Okay, so I was wondering, I've taken a look at small tidbits of what occurred on the ground in the last 24 hours or so, or maybe 48 hours, because yesterday I was doing other things. But I was wondering, has there been any news of further, shall we say, market movements within Russian military of using Atacam's brand cigarettes?
Not quite yet. We do expect the representative of the Atacam's cigarette brand to be back with us this evening after about 8:21.
Excellent.
I think that'll be right in time for some new examples of his tobacco products in use.
Excellent. Thank you.
What we can talk about is what some Turkish tobacco has been doing in Ukraine over the recent days. So a single pair, apparently, of Bayraktar drones has I think that's all on the Kherson front, destroyed $26.5 million worth of Russian military equipment between August 31st and September 2nd. And that included 8 T-72 tanks, 1 Akatsiya self-propelled artillery piece, that's a 2S3 for anyone following, an infantry fighting vehicle, and several towed howitzers. Additionally, 5 T-72 tanks and an additional infantry fighting vehicle was damaged. I'm suspecting some of this was in explosions going off close to them as opposed to being hit directly, because one of those munitions should thoroughly destroy a tank, as they did 8 of them. What they don't even mention are the mortar hits that we observed in a video from a Bayraktar from the 31st of August, as well as that is a hit on a mortar position, nor that supply truck, I believe an ammo truck, that they hit as well. And that's possibly where some of those damaged tanks were listed. I think that is very impressive as well. And, it's always good to include Turkish tobacco in with the Virginia stuff on occasion as well. What do you reckon, Antti?
Yes, and serve with some nice hot tea that may resemble petrochemical products from these trucks. To the casual observer, is always a spicing experience.
Absolutely. So it's great to have a complete meal of both a smoke and a drink. Nina.
Hey, Domen and
Here, siren
everybody
alert
else.
update. Donetsk, all clear. This message has been generated with municipal data.
Other than the discussion that has been going on for a while that I have been listening. I have observed, this is just an observation, this is not like criticism, that there were for a while 3 people talking at the same time, and I really struggled to hear anything what those 3 people said at the same time. So it was for me very difficult to understand what was talked about. And also I observed that there was somebody who I actually don't know, and it can be anybody who says anything about how somebody
Here, siren
else
alert
thinks
update.
or how
Donetsk,
somebody else feels.
all clear.
It's impossible
This message
to know.
has been generated with municipal data.
This is not, of course, Tom knows about this. And I would really prefer if somebody is thinking something, talk about your own thoughts and feelings. And I would really appreciate if people wouldn't say that you are thinking this or you are feeling this, because they can absolutely not know. So it's a little bit not passive aggressive. It's a little bit like it's judgmental, and this is just observation that I did here. I'm listening after this, and I hope that you are not taking this in any bad way. I'm just trying to follow what is happening, and yeah, thank you very much, and I appreciate everything what you do.
Thank you, Nina. At this point, I will pick up on the first of the things that you said and highlight the importance of good microphone etiquette and not talking over one another, because it becomes genuinely very difficult for people who are merely listening to actually hear anything. Because, well, it is very difficult to hear anything when there's 3 sets of voices, or even 2 already, but 3 or more especially overlapping all at the same time. And so it's not a good.
Thank you, Domen. And I don't say this only for myself, even if I struggled to hear what was talked about. But if I might not have been the only one who struggled to hear. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely not. Thank you, Nina.
Mic check.
I was just going to play the cricket sound. Nina? Right, Nina, your hand was up a second ago. I don't know if you're speaking into muted mic now.
Oh, yes, I was. Okay, I read on Helsingin Sanomat that UK has said, I don't know who in UK, but UK says that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has probably been a big surprise for the Russians. I don't know how you see this, or have anybody talked about this here.
Well, we can delve a little bit into the daily UK MOD Defense Intelligence Report, if you'd like. I have a strong hunch that is where Helsinki and Santamat are getting these thoughts from. This morning, the UK Ministry of Defence notes the following. Since the 29th of August, the Ukrainian armed forces have been conducting renewed defensive operations in the south of Ukraine. One element of this offensive is an ongoing advance on a broad front west of the Dnipro River, that is to say on the right bank, focusing on 3 axes within Russian-occupied Kherson Oblast. The operation has limited immediate objectives, but Ukrainian forces have likely achieved a degree of tactical surprise. That's the bit that you were noting from Helsinki and Santamat, exploiting poor logistics, administration, and leadership in the Russian armed forces. With fighting also continuing in the Donbass and Kharkiv sectors, a key decision for Russian commanders in the coming days will be where to commit any operational reserve force they can generate. And at this point, the UK MOD Defence Intelligence Update, famously concise, ends. But at this point, I would note that generating an operational reserve force is one thing, but actually deploying any such operational reserve force to the right bank of the Dnipro might be very difficult indeed, because the communication lines across the Dnipro River have been substantially limited. Now, we did see an analysis from Tim Erhardt, I think, of some satellite imagery, that Russians are attempting to resupply across the Dnipro over the recent days quite extensively. However, their ability to do so has been limited. Yesterday, we observed, around this time yesterday, we actually observed that strikes of both ends of the Antonivsky railway bridge, not on the bridge itself, but next to it. Presumably, that was on some accumulations of Russian equipment, of Russian vehicles parked just as they were about to go on a ferry, or just as they had disembarked from a ferry, perhaps both, one on each side. And that is going to significantly additionally constrain Russian resupplies across the river. There's also a pontoon bridge, which has been reported to have been destroyed close to Kakhovka, and that was noted by the Ukrainian Southern Operational Command. So, that all of that is very important indeed. Getting rid of those capacities. I will also note that the Ukraine Southern Command also notes 14 tanks destroyed in the south of Ukraine, 14 Russian tanks destroyed in the south of Ukraine. Now, if you look at the total summary for the entirety of Ukraine, 25 tanks were destroyed. So 14 out of 25 would have been in the south, the other 11 would have been on either Zaporizhia, Donetsk, or Kharkiv oblasts, right? So that's kind of the split there. Which means that there was indeed quite a lot of activity down in the south, and one would presume that the majority of those destroyed APCs, IFVs, guns, vehicles, fuel tanks, etc., would also be in the south if the proportionality, if a similar proportion as the tanks of also those other capacities was destroyed down in the south of Ukraine. So I'm not entirely sure, but I'm definitely quite confident that there has been quite extensive fighting on the right bank of the Dnipro yesterday, but more importantly, that Russia doesn't really have the capacity to successfully resupply and reinforce the right bank of the Dnipro, even if they were able, hypothetically, to raise any such operational reserve somewhere. Christopher?
So, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're at in the world. Just to add on to your point, Domin, the Russian embassy of UK was kind of begging Ukrainians to stop their offensive because, oh no, your people are dying. No, you guys are losing. But anyways, I have a question for you, Doman, and anyone in the panel. How significant is the fact that the United States is blocking the 56 visas for the Russian officials to the UN?
That's very interesting. I wasn't even aware of that. 56, you say?
Yes, the Russian delegation for the UN has been asking numerous times for the United States to give them the 56 visas, and the US has not complied.
Right, interesting. So that is that's for the delegation of the Russian foreign minister, Kalantarian. He keeps calling himself Lavrov for some reason, but his real name is Kalantarian, as we all well know. That is very interesting that they're doing that. I don't know why they're doing it. I couldn't possibly imagine why. But hey, I'm not going to complain over it. I'm sure they're going to issue them, at the last possible second. But making life a little bit more difficult for the Russian delegation, that isn't something to complain about. That's definitely sure. I certainly don't mind it. Let them. Russians tend to want to apply very annoying bureaucratic requirements on various people, and if some annoying bureaucratic requirements get applied to them occasionally, that's perfectly fine by me as well. Ian?
Hi there. Morning. Yeah, or afternoon, actually. Just on this point about visas, I recall several times in the past where the US has delayed the issuance of visas to foreign ambassadors or ambassadorial staff to come to the UN. I assume this is just because they want time to vet these individuals. Perhaps not all of them have been vetted in the past, but the US always eventually grants these visas. They can't really deny them because, I mean, it's the UN. If the United States suddenly started refusing visas to foreign officials to come to the UN, it would bring into question the status of the UN and its office in New York. It's kind of a requirement of the United States to actually grant visas, but I'm sure if there are questions about particular individuals who might be connected to the SVR or the FSB, then I think they might perhaps deny a few. I mean, probably there's other people here who know the history of these kinds of things in the past. I don't know how many visas the United States has ever actually denied to any official coming to the UN. It probably has happened on a number of occasions, I would imagine, but these would be at most probably low-level staffers who might be the US might be up to dodgy stuff while they're in the US. I
think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
The security situation is heightened. There are people there on the delegation that might not have been vetted before. Even some that might have been vetted before have to be re-vetted under the circumstances, and it's only right they're doing it. And yeah, I completely agree. They're going to issue them eventually. They're just going to take a little bit longer than normal. That's as you say, there is a requirement in some sort of a treaty that established the UN location in New York, that the US is going to allow delegates from other countries to come without too much hassle. So, but it's only right that they do check for all the reasons you stated, Ian, that they take their time and properly check everyone who's applying for a visa. Antti?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we shouldn't perhaps overthink this issue. It just might be red tape.
Precisely. Nina?
Well, to Ian, what you said about America, about those visas, this is only my own opinion, but I think that tourist visas should not be allowed at all for the Russians. If you have some really UN work or something. Yes, after checking, but touristing in these times when they are at the same time making a genocide is just not like ethically or morally right. But this is just my opinion.
I concur, and that's a completely separate issue, obviously, right? Because this particular case, these 56, these are all Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at least presumably, delegates to the UN General Assembly. However, you're quite right, and I completely agree that for others who might be applying for tourist visas for wherever in the free world, then I don't think that is the appropriate place or time, indeed. Brian.
Yes, good morning or afternoon, one and all. I would just make a slight observation on a more humorous note, or something that had been a bit of a mystery to me for a while. I finally figured out who Axel reminds me of. And I say this with the greatest respect and ever so slightly tongue-in-cheek. You know the BBC series Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch? And Sherlock's older brother, the fellow who is said to actually run the British government, extremely intelligent and with a delightfully acerbic wit, like a verbal scalpel that could flay a man alive at 50 paces. And suddenly dawned on him, my God, that's it. Axel is Mycroft Holmes. Thank you.
Actually, I sincerely hope you take that as a compliment. Thank you, Brian. I've not actually watched the thing, so...
No, typically people address me as Control. Whilst we're at BBC references.
So Axel, do tell us, how long is the walk from your house to the local branch of the Diogenes Club?
I'm not quite sure that we've allowed anybody to linger in a barrel here in our vicinity. I wouldn't give away my wine barrels for such purpose.
Papi?
So on the visa topic that comes again and again, so I mentioned that there are possibly good reasons on both sides, and the people that I respect are against the visa tourist ban for Russians, and I am frankly in favor of it right now. And I just wanted to mention that one of the reasons why I am currently in favor of tourist visa ban is what I would call a personal experience. So I know someone who left Belarus. For context, the Czech Republic early in March banned all tourists from Russia and Belarus, right? So this person has left Belarus with a tourist visa. And frankly, the reason why she left is because of her gender orientation, her sexual orientation, and things are not easy for people with specific sexual orientation in Belarus. However, while she is living in the Czech Republic and having done so on a tourist visa, she actually is in favor right now of a tourist visa ban for Russians. So the reason for that is that she's putting some rather compelling argument together that, her personal situation and people like her might be harmed, and they will, frankly, by a tourist visa ban, because the tourist visa ban was often used as a pretext for leaving the country. And when you leave the country, then you are looking for other options. However, she's looking at the overall context, and she's looking at the fact that there is a war, and she has friends in Ukraine that have a much more difficult situation than she has, just because she has now to look for different options for staying in the Czech Republic. And it looks to me that it is a very compelling reason. So, yes, it will harm some people. Some people will be worse off. But if anyone has their heart in the right place, probably they will still consider the overall context and the visa ban for tourists. I'm not saying for everybody, but for tourists is something that when you put things on balance is still the right thing to do.
We can revisit some of the additional reasons for that, right? On the one hand, a lot of countries, especially countries nearby to Russia, are under a lot of pressure because of the ability of Russian quote-unquote tourists to still quote-unquote visit. And that puts authorities in these countries in often difficult position because it's difficult to, it's operationally difficult to detailedly examine everything that they're bringing across the border each way, while making sure that sanctions are indeed diligently and thoroughly enforced. Right, so that's an important component here as well. The second one is, of course, there is no reason to make life seem normal for people with relatively disproportionately large political power within the middle classes and upper classes of Moscow and St. Petersburg, even once individually not sufficiently important for personal sanctions to be levied against them. But nevertheless, the sense of normalcy, the sense of belonging to the broader West, to the free world, when your country is committing genocide in a neighboring state, and you're not doing anything at all about that, should certainly not apply. Just a quick summary there. Nina?
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that if you have some difficulties living in your own country because of such a thing that Papi just mentioned, it's always possible to seek asylum in another country, and then you don't need the tourist visa. But of course, this is not like a simple question. But if you don't agree for political or any reason to stay in your country, if you are threatened, then seek asylum. This is
But you end up a little bit in a vicious circle here, Nina, because to be frank, when you are leaving the country, you cannot really say, I am leaving the country, be it Belarus or Russia, because I want to go there to seek political asylum. That is a non-starter. So you need some reason to go out of the country. And in Russia and Belarus, to my understanding, certainly in Russia, but I believe also in Belarus, you need to have a visa for the country where you are going to before you get permission to get out of the country. So it's not easy. So I have no doubt that some people in those countries that really want to live for the right reasons will have their life a little bit more difficult, or maybe much more difficult. There are still ways to do it.